Welcome to Unapologetically AuDHD. I'm Patricia Young, MSW, and I'm an AuDHD former therapist and current coach.
I'm Alex McLaughlin, MSW and LICSW, and I'm an AuDHD therapist. This is a podcast with two friends processing what it's like to live in body-minds that diverge from neuronormative standards, and everything that comes with it, the good, the bad, and the beautifully messy.
We aim to release 2 or more episodes per month. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for help from a licensed mental health practitioner. Hey there. How are you doing today, Alex?
I am feeling a little ungrounded, but use some resources and tools and trying to get myself to be more grounded. And also it's okay that I'm maybe not the most grounded.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. We can just show up how we are. Welcome, everybody. This thing I probably should have said welcome to everybody and all the listeners first, and I haven't been doing that. Hello, we're so glad you're here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I told you I had a client this morning and then some time between sessions, and I have this long to-do list. I need to record some episodes for my podcast, and I wrote a check, and we talked about that's a big thing, but it's hard to feel like it's a big thing when there are lots of other things. So I'm living in the land of not enough, which is also okay.
Yeah, it's hard though when there's a voice in the back of your head that's telling you what you're doing isn't enough and you're trying your best, and PDA kicks in and that makes it more challenging, and then it just kind of, I don't know about you, but it can create that cycle.
Yeah, and there's a lot of PDA there. So anyways, how about if we wrap up our DSM criteria of what is autism? And I'm going to turn it over to you, Alex. I just want to say you're so good at reflecting. I get my tasky hat on, so I'm just like, let's get through this and get to the next thing. And then you reflect, and I'm like, oh, dang, I should have said something.
Oh, I feel like I think the opposite. I feel like you're good at reflecting, and I'm sometimes in that tasky brain.
Oh,
that's
so
funny that's each of our perspectives.
I think it's important. I mean, I think that's why it's important that we name it, because so often I know for me that my internal experience is quite vastly different than I think how many people perceive me outwardly. And when we have relationships like you and I do, and we expose or share our internal experience and our external experience, just like we did, it's like, oh, wow. That's really where the deep connection comes from, when we feel like it's okay to say those things that we feel like, ooh.
Yeah. Thank you for being a safe person.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm just trying to feel into that for a second instead of just being like moving on, because I think it's important that we feel into those things.
I'd rather stand my head. Thank you.
I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that's what I'm going to do for me.
Yeah, because you're not the boss of me.
I'm not. You're right. You are the boss of you.
That's PDA if you're not familiar, listener.
Okay, so we left off on criterion B. So we finished up with criterion B, and now we're moving on to criteria C, D, and E. And these aren't criteria in the same way that they were before. Like, these aren't traits per se. So criteria C is that traits must present in the early developmental period, though there is a note that they might not become fully manifest until social demands exceed limited capacities, or they may be masked by learned strategies later in life. Essentially just saying that a person has to have experienced autistic traits throughout their childhood and into adulthood. And knowing that often this can get masked, or it might not present until adolescence, or until kind of that age where it becomes less about the play. At least for me, it feels like when I hit middle school, when it was the social dynamics started to get more complex, that's when I think it presented more for me. Though obviously I wasn't diagnosed until I was in my 30s anyways, but I think Yeah, that's just an example of the social demand exceeding one's capacities.
I think too that there are so many things that, especially if you have autism in the family that's undiagnosed, what the child may be doing is exactly what the parent or the aunts and uncles or grandparents did. So it's not seen as something different. I was just watching a reel today, and there was a family, and she said her youngest child is independent. And what I saw was a kid on the subway with headphones plugged into some type of electronic device. There's no judgment there. But I thought, oh, autism. And then they were talking about restaurants that they went to. And she said, oh, he eats pizza and pasta. And I thought, sounds like autism. So those are ways that it may be showing up that people have picky eaters, or my son was very meticulous and things had to be a certain way. He was very clothes as one of his special interests. And we don't think about that with boys, but he wanted dress pants when he turned 5. That was, his clothes were really important. I think with social things that if you have young kids and they go off and spend time with friends or come home from school, or when my husband would watch the kids, I'd come home and they'd have a meltdown. And my husband would always say, well, they were fine till you got home. And what the implication is that they were able to follow the rules and what he needed. And then mom's a safe person. So when mom comes home, then the kids let down. And if they were trying to hold things together, things were difficult. Not to say that my husband did anything wrong. That's what happens. But I don't think that we think about those things, or kids that eat food a certain way. I mean, there are all these little things that show up: being hyperlexic, reading early, being very precocious. Those are all signs of autism that may not be like head banging or hand flapping or an interest in dinosaurs, although that is part of what we see as kids that are super bright and very, very interested in things, or asking very abstract questions about. I had a client the other day, and her son was asking, like, how come the wind is strong enough to move the clouds, but it doesn't top buildings over? So those don't fit our stereotypical ideas of what autism, not walking on their toes or things like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm curious if you can think about any ways that it presented for you. And I think we maybe talked about this in an episode, but it's been, I feel like, eons since we've first started this series. So maybe it's okay that we revisit, but I guess I'm curious if there's anything that you can think of in your childhood.
Reading, I think, was probably the biggest thing for me, that I started reading early, and I was just a voracious reader. And in elementary school, I was asked to not bring books to school because all I wanted to do was to read books. And I had stomach aches all the time, was very anxious, did not want to go to school, would hide from the camp counselors when the summer camp bus came to pick me up. I'd sneak out of the house to go buy candy. I think candy was a way that I self-regulated. I think it's how I stimmed, but I had a lot of shame around it because of the sneakiness around it. So many times, I think, although nobody knew because I was very compliant, but I think adults see some of these behaviors and they don't understand it in terms of autism and trying to self-regulate, and they see it as misbehavior, not necessarily with my behavior, but I was talking with a friend whose child was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. And I thought, wonder if she has PDA, pervasive persistent drive for autonomy, and is an autistic, because this is a young kid that's acting out more as opposed to acting in, where many folks that are assigned female at birth, a lot of sensitive boys as well, we tend to internalize. So that's why I had stomach aches, headaches, a lot of somatic things a lot of the time. I didn't like leaving the house. I really liked if kids came to my house, and I didn't like going to other kids' houses. I was a heavy sleeper. I wet the bed. And I remember spending the night at a friend's house and wetting the sleeping bag, and her mom being really frustrated, and how much shame I felt. I'm like, I was just having a good sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? Anything that you can see?
Yeah, I think kind of looking back, I was always told that I was like a shy kid and was kind of always in my own world, and like could entertain myself for hours. And right, I think that is consistent with autism, of kind of being internally in your own world, right? And like escaping to fantasy, escaping to your own mind. Watching like home videos, I would see people talking to me and I wasn't making any facial, like I wasn't making eye contact, or sometimes I wouldn't even acknowledge them because probably I didn't hear them. Yeah, I had seeing like pictures, like I would often stim with like my fingers in my mouth and was just like chewing on a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when I would sort and organize things, and when I played Barbies, I wanted to set up the house. I didn't want to do the imaginary
Mm-hmm.
play of Barbies, and I would, right? But I experienced more joy setting up the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then in middle school, I was really obsessed with Hanson, the band.
Mm-hmm.
And I had posters all over, like my walls were covered.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be, I'd want to talk about them all the time. I'd want to listen to them all the time. I would wear the band t-shirts all the time, kind of past the point where it's quote unquote like socially acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those were some of the ways that it presented for me. And just taking things really literally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still do, but I understand, right, the nuance, and I can understand like how to kind of pick up on like if that was literal, if someone meant it literally. But yeah.
I think too that if the behaviors of the potential autistic child are not disruptive to others, it's not an issue. It's only when that behavior becomes disruptive to other people that people take notice. And that's one of the big reasons why it goes unnoticed.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm thinking too, I loved looking through cookbooks and especially the baking section. I like baking, and those are things that are pretty average. I was also very precocious in this is probably the autism going back generations and having immigrants, but language and English and using correct words was very important. And that just feeds into being pedantic. And if you're not familiar with the word pedantic, it actually has a very negative connotation. But autistics are like exactness is very important, and it's often confused for thinking that we need to be right. But the meaning of language, how language is used, exactness is just part of how we understand things and asking lots of questions. So that can also look like we're trying to be difficult, but it's that being pedantic, which really is, I'm proudly pedantic. I don't know if other autistic people would have that same positive connotation, but it's just who I am.
Yeah, thank you for defining that, because I was having a moment where I'm like, I don't remember what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The external presentation. So, something to keep in mind is the diagnostic criteria, right, is built around how autism externally presents, meaning how other people are going to observe autism in others versus like the internal experience. And so my hope is that we've provided examples of how it might show up internally as well, so that folks have a broadened idea of what autism is.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about criteria C?
That's all I can think about for right now. But I know before I got my diagnosis, I was concerned because I really couldn't come up with what I felt like were things in my childhood. I mean, I shared the things that we've talked about, and obviously that was enough. Also counting. I was a big counter as a kid, counting lots of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I used to do that too. I would count. Well, I think part of this was ADHD, but I'd be in church and I would count the like ceiling. I don't know. There were like beams. The church I was, was quite pretty, I think, the like architecture of it. And so I would count those things, but that was just to kind of keep my mind occupied because I found church so boring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to criteria D. So I'm going to change the language a bit. So traits must cause challenges within life. And these challenges are not present because of being autistic. The challenges are present because being autistic in a world that is not built for us. So, someone might meet the other criteria of autism, but maybe they're coping fine and they're getting by through life fine. So maybe they don't actually receive a diagnosis because they aren't having difficulties in life as a result of being autistic in a world not built for us.
Yes, but what I imagine that would look like is a number of people that can go out into the world and be very out there and whatever they need to do, whether it's social or not, and then come home and are too exhausted to do anything, or who collapse on the weekends because they're just spent. And I know so many women that are not diagnosed or are recently diagnosed and don't recognize that that is part of the consequence of masking. And I went out on disability, I think at least 2 times in my career, maybe 3. And I'm convinced now in retrospect it was autistic burnout, but because I was also, whether it's correct or not, diagnosed with anxiety and depression, that's what it appeared to be. And so again, when we look at the criteria, I was functioning, I was productive, I just needed some time off, or I could go to work and then I couldn't get a lot done, but the amount of energy that I could put into being, quote, productive and successful, and nobody knew what went on behind closed doors. So people can have this impression that they're doing well, but not knowing that this isn't normal or average.
Yeah.
I don't like the word normal, but I don't have a better word to use.
And I would say, right, what you're describing, to me, that is difficulty or challenges, right? Because your quality of life is reduced. You're quote unquote functioning at the expense of your mental health, right? I've been there too. So
Right.
I'm speaking from my own perspective, right? I don't know that every assessor is going to see that. Like, I honestly, I'm like, I don't know if I believe there's a single autistic person who would meet all the criteria except this one, because like, if you're high masking, you're suffering in some way, right? Like the cost of masking, like you're saying, is leading to that crash or that burnout or that needing a weekend or even longer to recuperate. And so, yeah, I would argue that I'm like, show me an autistic person who meets the criteria who doesn't meet this one. I just don't think that exists. But that is a thing that some assessors might see, that be like, oh, you're functioning, quote unquote, in external life, but they might not see what's happening behind the scenes and take that into consideration for this criteria.
I'm in total agreement. And if you took a bunch of moms, and especially if one mom is neurodivergent, chances are her other mom friends are also neurodivergent, and this is the norm for them. So they don't see anything wrong with it, that this is just what motherhood is. And I know that this shows up in lots of other areas for other marginalized groups and culturally. But speaking from my own experience, I think this is where we miss things, because this is just it's very normalized, and it's not normal. It shouldn't be like that. Yeah.
Yep. Anything else related to criteria D?
That's all I can think of.
Cool. Finally, last but not least, drum roll. That's quite the drum roll. Criteria E. I'm trying to think of a way to trying to think of a reframe. These disturbances are not better explained by intellectual disability or global developmental delay. What do you think she means by disturbances? Like the disturbances of functioning, or like the differences, the traits?
I think the differences, because I mean, this is also very real on how we try to figure out what are they talking about, but I'll defer to you.
Man, but now I feel like a fraud.
Why do you feel like a fraud?
Because, I'm a therapist and I'm like, I don't know. I forgot what that means.
Yeah, I think it means if you look at the DSM criteria, these are all written in terms of deficits, problems, deficits, difficulty with social functioning, difficulty. And so what they're saying is all of these things that we've talked about are not accounted for by intellectual disability or global developmental delay. Like if you experience all these things and you don't have a global developmental delay or an intellectual disability, then it's autism. Which just kind of shows how poorly thought of this is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not a science. It's not, the DSM isn't, the criteria is not evidence-based. Like it's just, I think you had said, like, just a bunch of white dudes getting together, saying, this is what we see. These are common traits or symptoms that we see.
Sure.
Anyways, I don't need to know for sure because I think what your explanation is good enough, and my OCD brain is like, no, I need to know.
Yeah.
For sure I don't. Nope. Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add.
Well, speaking of that, I think that this is also part of autism. I can't tell you how many times I'm scrolling on TikTok and I run across something that's either a statistic, a fact, something I haven't heard, and I have to jump over to the internet because I want to fact check. And, or you're watching something I think I know that actor or actress, and didn't they play in? And, that need for validating information, which is what you're talking about right now. I want to make sure this is correct. I want some more information. That is part of our being pedantic, needing more information, wanting validation, and who we are. And how many times are you in a room with somebody where somebody has to jump on the phone and they're the fact checker? That's part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think you wanted to talk about some careers that autistic people might find themselves in.
Yeah. And if this is not researched, but obviously engineers, aerospace engineers, people that love numbers, data crunching. So very possible that accountants, people that do finance, I would say a number of physicians, if you're in the medical field, and attorneys. I would also say musicians. And I have book club, and so I'm listening to this book for the book club, and it's talking about these two people and the way that they related over music and their extensive knowledge of songs and music. And that can be a special interest. And it's not uncommon for autistics to have perfect pitch. I am not one of them, but to have perfect pitch. And so we think often of autistics in terms of engineers and being very critical thinking and logical, but I think it's equally apparent for those of us that are maybe more internalizers, more of the sensitives, creatives, artists, that's where it can show up too. Now, please understand, I'm not saying everybody, but these are areas where I think that it had data analysts, people that love data and putting it together.
Yeah. I would also wonder too about like scientists like that, maybe do more kind of the data analysis or like experimenty, like science.
Researchers.
Thank you. That's the word.
Yeah.
I would think that librarians.
Yes. Yes.
And I wonder the amount of AFAB individuals that are autistic that go into the helping profession in some form, like psychology.
Yeah.
I would bet that there's a higher percentage of of us in this field.
Yes, absolutely.
I wonder about like police too. I don't know why, but I'm just having a thought of like, because I remember one time I used to be a referee for lacrosse, and someone commented, did you used to be a police officer? You're so black and white with the rules. And I'm like, so I wonder if there's an element of, that might.
Well, I think the military also draws some people in. And I personally know someone who's currently in the military who has told me how many people have either been diagnosed autistic or this person is familiar with what autism looks like and has said that there is autism. It's also something that can get you kicked out of the military. So, but yeah, because it's a place to go, because it's very clear about what is expected. There's really not a lot of gray area. And for people that need that, it can be very comforting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you say engineers because I have several family members that were engineers. And by were, I mean the family member that passed away. And also one of them was in the military, and like this family member is very clearly autistic, but like was born in an era where that was not recognized or like was hardly recognized. And so, I find it, I'm just kind of giggling to myself.
Writers and comedians as well, because they observe so many things. When you read something that's very descriptive or noticing differences, and I don't mean that positive or negative, but just how descriptive things can be. And comedians who we laugh because they're talking about things that we experience, but it's not conscious to us. Yeah.
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 Is there anything else that you feel like would be helpful to name while we're on the topic of, autism and the diagnostic criteria?
I was trying to think because I know that so many people that come, even just to do consults with me, identify as a highly sensitive person, which is what I specialized in before I knew I was autistic, and we'll have a consultation thinking, have you considered autism? And I'm surprised that more often than not, they have thought about it. And I just keep thinking, how can we get the information out? What are the things that people are not hearing? And that tendency to want to go back into doubt about, even after getting a diagnosis or self-identifying, of having that doubt. And I've been going through that around my hypermobility, that a doctor of physical therapy said, I suspect I'm hypermobile. And he confirmed it, and he evaluated me. But I'm like, yes, but he didn't do this. Maybe I'm not. And so I'm just also reflecting that tendency that we have, that even once we get a diagnosis or we self-identify, that there's that tendency to go into doubt.
Yeah. And I would say, I don't know about you, but I feel like at this point in my journey, I don't doubt it anymore, but I think it's not linear, right? I think it can come and go. So, yeah, I want to name that.
Yeah.
My brain is like not sure what else to say. So
I know. I'm kind of in the same place that I want to say something that's really profound or meaningful, that somebody will go, yes, that's it. That's what I needed to hear. But I think the self-doubt, and there are times when we can operate in society and do very well. There are times when we struggle more. I think the expectations before we know that we're autistic, we think that we're just falling short. I mean, kind of this example of, I wrote a check and felt really like I didn't get anything done because I feel like societally I should be very productive, and it just didn't happen this morning. It may come later, it may not. But how often we have these standards that society sets out, and if we don't meet them, instead of recognizing we're not wired that way and the world wasn't meant for us, and it's okay if I only write one check today, that we think something's wrong with us. And that kind of keeps us in this place where I think that when we do get a diagnosis or self-identify, we go into doubt because it is inconsistent. And also, finding other people that are neurodivergent doesn't always mean that we're wired the same, that we will bump up against things in those neurodivergent relationships. And I think there's this expectation of, I'm going to find my people and everything's going to be okay, but it looks different for everybody.
Yeah, I want to say, and maybe I named this when we first started the podcast, but I think I spent so much of my adult life trying to figure out what was quote unquote wrong with me so that I could work on the mental health concerns that I was assuming that's what was quote unquote wrong.
Sure.
And so getting the diagnosis was life changing, because it's like, okay, I don't need to search anymore, right? I know that I'm just wired differently. And so I need to accommodate myself versus trying to like fix something inside of me.
Yeah. And I have so much passion around how often autistic folks are misdiagnosed, that they'll get an evaluation, maybe they'll get ADHD with complex PTSD because the assessor doesn't want to give an autism diagnosis. They'll say, oh, I see some traits, but I think it's trauma. Where if you're autistic, you're going to have trauma. Or people will get a borderline personality disorder diagnosis, or bipolar disorder, or OCD. And OCD may be there, but the autism is skipped over. And I have such strong feelings about that because practitioners are not knowledgeable about all the different ways that autism can show up. And so the intense emotional dysregulation, or having strong feelings or big feelings, is misdiagnosed. And it just hurts my heart.
Yeah. And I think too, right, if we're thinking about folks of color, right, we might tend to get misdiagnosed with like ODD, schizoid, like one of the kind of schizophrenia, like spectrum disorders, things like that too. So, and right, getting a diagnosis like that can just be so harmful. If it,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in general, like, I think it just is, it can feel like such a big thing. And so I think, it's really too bad that more providers aren't aware of all the different presentations of autism. And I mean, we could go on a tangent about the DSM in general and like, do we even need it? Right.
Right.
But yeah.
How much of the distress has to be internalized for people of color and people in marginalized communities because it's not safe. And how many of the kids in the juvenile justice system have been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder and go through the penal system that are really autistic, but they were misdiagnosed and mistreated based on their color, their socioeconomic status, and what a disservice has been done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we know examples of folks that lose their lives because of being in a body that's racialized and being autistic, right? And then that's the reality of the world we live in, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm just kind of sitting with the heaviness of that.
I know. I don't want to end on that note.
Well, it's real though. Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else. Alex, how about you?
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah, I'm just trying to also like remind myself that being with that discomfort is part of the work rather than trying to like run away from it, like, okay, I can be with this discomfort.
Yeah. I do want to acknowledge that in the times that we're living in right now, that many of us are managing a tremendous amount of discomfort for a number of reasons, and our capacity to handle more discomfort may be limited, compromised, and we're living through unprecedented times. So it is hard, everybody.
Yeah.
Alex, where can people find you, and what do you have to offer?
So I offer therapy and assessments, autism and ADHD assessments, therapies for, ages 6 up, assessments right now. I'm focusing on adults. I would say my specialty, quote unquote, is, autistic, ADHDers, folks with OCD, folks with chronic illnesses, or disability. And then I'm also a coach, consultant, and trainer. My therapy practice and assessment practice is the divergentgrovetherapy.com. And my coaching, consulting, and training practice is divergentgroveunlearningcollaborative.com, and that'll be in the show notes. How about you? What do you have going on these days?
I can be found at unapologeticallysensitive.com. I have a podcast by that name, Unapologetically Sensitive. I too work with neurodivergent folks, ADHD, autism, AuDHD, OCD. If you suspect you're autistic, if you identify as HSP, you're struggling, if you want to try and figure out, I don't do assessments, but I'm pretty good at spotting autism, not so much ADHD. And just all the challenges that come with that, parenting, work relationships, personal relationships, trying to figure out systems that work. So much of the work is really, for me, with the clients that I have, is learning, like, that's autism, that's your neurodivergence, that there's nothing wrong with you, and normalizing it and validating it, and then figuring out what are ways that we can create a life that is more workable for you, and really leaning into, this is how I'm wired and there's nothing wrong with me. So, yeah. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at unapologeticallyaudhd@gmail.com. And I think that's it. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being listeners. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for spending time with us in this space where your too muchness is never too much. Remember, you're not broken, and you're definitely not alone. We're here to honor the complexity, celebrate the nuance, and walk this neurodivergent path together.
You might consider giving us a rating and a review on the platform you listen to podcasts. It gives others an opportunity to see our podcast and walk this path. with us. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind to your nervous system, and stay unapologetically AuDHD. You belong here.